if you have been reading Russian literature, or if you have ever done a little bit of research on Russian writers, you have probably heard of the name Nikolai Gogol. All right, let me help you out a little bit. There was this another Russian writer who used to influence Nikolai Gogol a lot, and Nikolai Gogol used to be an avid admirer of that writer. His name was Alexander Pushkin. Now, a lot of you might have heard his name. And then there was this other Russian writer who was greatly influenced by the work of Nikolai Gogol, and his name was Dostoevsky. Now, most of you have definitely heard of him. So today we're going to talk about this little novella, this little horror novella written by Nikolai Gogol himself in the 18th century. The story is based in Kiev, Ukraine, and there was this monastery called Bratsky, and there were 3 students who were studying over there. One of their names were Omar Brut. So Omar Brut, along with his 2 comrades, they used to travel together, all 3 of them, in search of grocery and other necessary stuff. So one day, they traveled a little bit too far. They were a bit greedy that day. So when darkness fell, they were looking for shelter. And in a desolate part of the countryside, there was this old lady who used to live alone. She invited them in. She offered them food for the night and lodging as well. So in the dead of the night, Omar Brut wakes up. And surprisingly, he discovers that this old lady is not a human being. She is a witch, and a witch with a peculiar fetish. Now, somehow, this witch develops a fascination towards Omar Brut himself, and after a lot of weird stuff happening, Omar Brut, he narrowly escapes with his life. Within the next couple of days, Omar Brut is invited by the then Cossack chief, because apparently his daughter died and they need to go through a 3-day full of rituals and other religious preparations before they put her to sleep forever. And somehow Omar Brut, he obliges to go with the proceedings and everything. And that's when the real horror starts. Now, I'm not going to spoil any more of the story because this is such a small book. It's only about 120 pages. But I'm going to tell you about the specialities of this book, like why this book is so special, what makes this book so special, and what makes Nikolai Gogol so special. Now, in order to go through the story, you have to go through a 35-page intro. And rather than calling it an intro, I should call it a mini biography, because the first 35 pages, in the first 35 pages, the translator Shamsudduha Tauhid, he has summarized Nikolai Gogol's life with great care. In order to understand Nikolai Gogol and most of the story, you must go through the 35-page intro. And let me tell you, the first 35 pages were as fascinating as the story itself. I couldn't skip it. I couldn't skip any part of it. And then there's 5 to 7 more additional pages at the end of the book those were written by a good friend of Shamsudduha Tauhid. His name is Evgeny Spirin, and he's from Russia. So this book has been vetted by someone from Russia, and that's what makes this book so special. Now, and also at the end of the story, it contains all the necessary notes to understand the cultural implications and all the special terminologies and jargons from the 18th century. Now, you need to keep in mind that this story or this text is really old. It's from the 18th century and it's from Northern Europe. Now, in the 18th century, Northern Europe was a really dark place, like plague and diseases and all the other breakouts. They were quite frequent. And there were lots of different tribes living there, and they didn't always see eye to eye with each other. And war was breaking out every now and then. So it was a really dark place. And civilization was scarce, really scarce. And due to the weather, it was a very depressing place as well. So to understand how people used to live at that time and their culture, their and what used to make them tick, and that like Nikolai Gogol makes a very solid representation of that through horror, satire, and dark comedy. And like the mixture of horror, satire, and dark comedy, it's like it is quite frequent, and it is quite common in Nikolai Gogol's work throughout his life, and that was later replicated by Dostoevsky as well. And that is what also makes this book really special. And in order to understand the times, and the cultural implications, and the cultural context, this book helps you definitely. This book definitely helps you a lot. And if I talk about the translation, the quality of translation, only the quality of translation, the first thing that came to my mind after I finished this book was this book was produced with great care, a lot of care, not only in terms of production quality, but also the translation quality as well. So Shamsudduha Tauhid, he translated this book from the original Russian text. This has not been translated from the English text. This was translated from the original Russian text. That is another speciality of this book. I don't know too many translators who can do that sort of thing in our country. I only know about him, Shamsudduha Tauhid. I don't know anyone else who can do something similar. So great stuff from Shamsudduha Tauhid. And when you're reading this, like, it is, the effort shows, like the effort really shows, and you can definitely feel that Shamsudduha Tauhid, he is trying to make a story from the 18th century to be told to the modern audience. He tried his best, because there's lots of areas where adaptability or adaptation needed to be done, and he did that successfully without altering the real text, the original text. So in terms of translation quality, top notch. This has been one of the best translations I have read in a very long time. That I can say for sure. And the validation from Evgeny Spirin, that also adds another feather in the cap. So really solid production from Nautilus publication, that is. And anyone who's a fan of Nikolai Gogol or Alexander Pushkin or even Dostoevsky, I will definitely recommend this book to them. Or if there's anyone who's looking for a solid horror story which comes from a really dark place, a really dark time of history, I will definitely recommend this book to them as well. So fantastic work. Really love this book. Solid work. And all the best to the entire team who were involved in producing this book. Thank you very much.